This is episode 65 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Charlie Hardage. Charlie is from H&K Investment Group. His tagline is investing together. He believes that financial freedom should be attainable for everyone. He also is the host of Passive Investors Playbook. I love having other podcast hosts on the show. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, Jonathan. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to have you and to meet you. I like to start here on most episodes. When you were younger, did you have an interest in real estate?
Kind of.
Oh,
really?
that's rare, surprisingly, for people. Most people say no, so I'm glad to hear it. Tell me what your first interest was.
Really when I was 10 or 11, I was interested in being my own boss, kind of the rich dad, poor dad. My dad was the poor dad, had 2 masters, really smart, but W-2 and only W-2. And my best friend's dad actually had his own business and multiple businesses, but so he was always around, able to hang out with him and go play putt-putt and movies and whatever. My parents actually did have a couple homes back when I was a newborn. And then when we moved, they sold all those and they did invest in a REIT in the late 80s. But that's about it. But my dad did talk about real estate, how they don't build, they don't build new land unless you're in Dubai. But they don't really build new land. And so kind of, by principle, real estate's great, although he didn't do much of it. So, I just didn't know what my niche would be, multifamily or whatever. But yeah, I was slightly interested in real estate, just didn't know too much about it at the time.
How long were you in the service?
About 5 years. I was in the Army.
Yeah, awesome. Because I've had obviously other military personnel and then other first responders, police, fire. And it's interesting that I feel like in a lot, at least in the last 10 years, investing in those circles has become much more popular. Like on deployment, you do have time to read, you have time to talk, but it's also a time to think about like, okay, how can I start building stuff, for home? Is that what kind of clicked in when you were deployed? Like, what am I going to do when I get home? Or was it something else?
I don't know. I think there's 2 books that I'm not a reader. I don't like reading. I listen to audiobooks a lot now. But on deployment, I brought Moneyball, which I love baseball, love analytics and Moneyball's great. And then Rich Dad, Poor Dad. My wife bought those books for me right before I left. And I was like, yeah, we'll see if I actually read them. Yeah. I had so much downtime that I did end up reading both of them. And when I read Moneyball, I was like, oh, this is great. Cause I remember, when that happened. Me too. Not an A's fan whatsoever, but love baseball. But then when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so we didn't have internet where I was at the base. And so when we went about once or twice a week to other bases, I did some research, called my wife. I was like, you got to send me, these 5 books. She sent me some books. I read those. I said, you got to send me these 5. And so over the course of a few months, I read more than I had probably read in high school and college combined, which is very sad and embarrassing. But man, I learned so much. And I felt like at that point, I was kind of on fire, just didn't know really what niche in real estate. And then during that deployment, I actually got injured. I got shot and I'm medically retired from the military. And so military was going to be my career, Jonathan. Yeah. Like I was 25 when I went in and that was going to be my job and my career. And life has other plans. And so fortunately at that time, I was on fire with real estate. And so I do think, even though when I got out of the military, went back to the corporate world, IT sales, just because that's what I knew, that's what I did before the military, I was learning as much as I could, as quick as I could for a long time.
Did you think that that kind of hot part of being so interested in real estate investing at the time helped you coming back? I mean, you planned on your career being in the military and then all of a sudden that's out. Did it help to have this to focus on because it was like such a new passion?
Yes and no. I think it definitely helped because real estate in general was a passion. Where I got stuck and where I struggled with, honestly, for years and years was that shiny object syndrome. I listened to Bigger Pockets, listened to a lot of podcasts, and everything I was learning wasn't like one thing about multifamily. Sometimes it was mobile home parks or flipping or wholesaling or whatever it was. And so I think just in general, real estate has so many different asset types, classes, and strategies. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about real estate. So I think I knew I wanted to get into real estate. I just didn't know what. And man, it took me so long to kind of figure out what I wanted to do in real estate,
Yeah.
but definitely drove me a lot. I mean, that was my focus for years.
Yeah, I know what you're saying though. I always recommend to people, especially like now Bigger Pockets has been going for so long. I always tell them, like, don't start at the beginning and just listen to all of them. I would even
Yeah.
say that for my podcast, even though I have a lot of listeners who start at the beginning. But like if you're really interested in something, like look at the titles and see what's there. Like, especially when you're new, you don't like if you listen to an apartment syndication, you're just gonna lose yourself. You still have to be like in the basics because that will keep you in analysis paralysis. If you're talking, you're
Yep.
brand new, you've never invested, and you're just listening to podcasts about, $250 million deals. It's too far ahead for you. Yeah, I think just for everybody listening, I think what's important about real estate, any type of investment syndication, obviously like flipping and stuff would be riskier, but like at least it's a tangible asset.
Yeah.
So for a partner who's thinking like, hey, what are you doing? Like at least there's, especially if you're doing syndications, like there's a large tangible asset that generates income. There's 100 apartments, people pay rent. You understand like, okay, like this is a real business. I think it's harder to sell somebody on like, hey, I'm just going to try to flip a house. I don't even know anything. I
Yeah.
watched HGTV, like we are talking about before a little bit. That's like scarier to me. So I like the lead in for this. And then, so like investment wise, how did you do your due diligence, as a limited partner for the first time? And then how has that changed over time?
Yeah. So the team that in the first two deals, it was the same, sponsors,
Yeah.
or same sponsorship team, and then some of the co-GPs were, different. But I mean, they've been doing this for, I don't know now, maybe 10 years or so, 8 to 12 years, somewhere in there. I've seen their track record. I know their worst deal that they've done. Um, you know, eh, I just knew, and I knew about their underwriting. Didn't mean I knew how to underwrite at
Yeah.
the time, but I knew, I talked to all three of the main sponsors multiple times. Um, Knew that they knew the market and the property manager and things like that. They had dozens and dozens of successful full cycle deals. So it wasn't like I met them online and said, "Hey, here's some money. I'm interested." I did more due diligence than probably most people would, only because I'm so risk averse. And to me, honestly, Jonathan, it sounded like a scam when I first started.
Yeah. A lot of people
Like,
say that. Yeah.
yeah, oh, you can passively invest and double your money in 5 years? Yeah, okay, no. But after educating myself on syndications, at least very, very high level, and how it works and how NOI works and the force appreciation, I was like, okay, it kind of makes sense to me. And then talking to the sponsors, I was like, okay, I'm good. I would say now that the difference between now and then is, I am looking for more conservative underwriting as well, more fixed rate debt. And I'm not opposed to floating and bridge debt, but there needs to be a lot more in place, I think, than what we've seen recently. More reserves and definitely a cap rate or a rate cap and things like that. And also looking for sponsors that are, if they're new or if they don't live in the area, they need to have a few assets in the area.
Yeah.
And that was not really on my checklist, 3, 4 years ago when I invested the first couple times.